Hey, and welcome to the Systems Boutique podcast. I'm Dr. Raymona H. Lawrence. Most people just simply call me Dr. Raymona. I'm your systems stylist and your business operations expert, and I'm here to help you build a high-end boutique style back-end that creates ease and scalability for you without sacrificing the luxury experience your clients absolutely deserve. So if you're a speaker, a coach, a consultant, a course creator, or author who's ready to stop the overwhelm, ditch the tech confusion, and finally streamline your systems and operations, you are in the right place. Each week, I'll bring you actionable strategies, expert insights, and behind-the-scenes business systems and operations insights to help you scale with ease, efficiency, and absolute excellence. So grab your notebook, your favorite cup of coffee or tea, and let's get to work. Welcome to the Systems Boutique, where systems meet style. Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Systems Boutique podcast. And who do we have styling you in the boutique today? It is Executive Coach Geo. Yes.
What's up?
So we always love having our executive coaches on the podcast, and you all know that they are here for you in the Systems Boutique. So whenever you come and you jump into the Systems Boutique, whether it be in our agency services or our CRM, you get access to the fabulous training from our executive coaches. And Coach Geo is our book coach. He is a fabulous book coach. I have seen him help many people get their books done, their first book, their second book, or however many that they are on. And so, Coach Geo, welcome back to
Thank you.
boutique.
Thank you for having me. Oh, man.
Yes. So we have been laughing and talking.
Yeah, we've been having a good time.
So today we're going to start with the foundation of writing a book. Okay. So there are things that people have. They have all of this expertise. They have all of this knowledge and things that they want to put in a book. And so what's that first strategic decisions that they need to make when they're about to write? Like not when they're writing, before they
Yeah.
write a single word.
No, that's good. That's good. I think when you have that rich experience, there's so much stuff. I think one of the greatest challenges is figuring out what do I put in and what I don't put in. And I've seen this happen to a lot of people who are coaches, speakers, thought leaders, where they're like, Geo, like I've been doing this for like 10, 15 years. How do I put that into a book and not make it like an encyclopedia? What I tell them is, what's your process look like? You want to try to think of a framework or a process so that way that wealth of knowledge is something that's now organized, because the reality is that knowledge is no longer something that escapes us. Like you can get information everywhere. Now, when you're doing your positioning and you want to be the expert, your expertise is no longer how much you know, it's how much of it that I can retain and actually use. And that's where you having a dialed in process or framework and then adding stories to go and show how that framework actually works is what you would do with your expertise versus you like, hey, let me tell you how much. It's not a contest of, well, who knows the most. That's where we get caught up. Right? Hey, well, I got 7 degrees. I got 600 certifications. That's not the point. The point is, can I use what you tell me? So it's tell me the fastest path to getting to the result that I want.
Yeah. And I've noticed that being a professor is that if I try to even talk to my students and tell them everything that I know, then they're like deer in the headlights. Like, what are you talking about? I even get better evaluations when I tell them less. Because for
Yeah.
him, it feels like, oh, I can digest what Dr. Lawrence is saying and not that she's just talking over my head. And I think that that is a little bit about what you're saying. in this is that how do you help people to just digest the information and not just regurgitate every single thing that you
I think
ever
that's the biggest challenge, and I think it's
Yeah.
actually the contrarian thought, or like the thing that easily gets missed, is that I got the expert. We like the expert knows everything, and I like the expert doesn't need to know everything. The expert needs to know how to solve the problem. So if you can go and tell me how to solve it in 2 steps versus someone who's going to help me solve it in 10, I want the speed of the two. Right. So you don't have to be competing with, oh my gosh, well, I got to show you how much I know. No, I got to show you how to get to what you want the fastest. And typically, it's the less, like you said, less is more. Frameworks allows it to be something that's easily consumable, right? You don't want to give somebody the equivalent of like a mental stomach ache because you just gave them too much to eat. Right, like you want to get them to be like, "Yo, here's a snack. Oh man, that was good. Let me get some more." And that's what you want with your readers. You want them to dive in. You want more. The book should not be the end. It should be something that takes someone to another destination. So everyone listening to this should feel like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't gotta give you everything. I gotta come back tomorrow." Or I want you to come back tomorrow and invest in something else. So frameworks allows you to do that, and then in giving them some type of implementation, and then once they see it working, then they're like, oh my gosh, like it actually works. I want more. And that's ultimately the feeling that we want the reader to have.
Yeah, so that's such a good point because a lot of times we do think, okay, if I'm writing a book, it's got to be the end all be all. And we don't think about the fact that it is just a part of the destination. And
Yeah.
so I always think about people that have 20, 30, 40 books. I'm like, how do they keep going? But they're just giving us pieces of it so that we keep
Right.
keep coming back, right?
Correct. Correct.
Ah, okay. Good, 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 good.
You got it.
So let's think about all of us who are multi talented. We have so many different things that we could talk about and that we know. So, how do you really help people narrow their message? And so they've got multiple lanes of expertise, and they like, I don't want to box myself in, but we know that they need to pick something that's a stop on the journey, right, for
Yeah,
them.
no, for sure. I think, well, I mean, number one, I think everybody got to just realize you can write more than one book. Let's start there, because I feel a lot of people are like, "Oh my gosh, like I don't know what to do." It's like John Maxwell's wrote like 75 leadership books, and every year I feel like another one's coming out, right? So, and it's always a different point of view, or like a little bit of like 1% of this audience, and then another 1% of that audience. So, I think the way I would tell somebody to make that decision is basically, what's the lowest hanging fruit? And when I say lowest hanging fruit, I mean like, what are you confident and clear on that you can deliver? That's where I would go and say, which one am I going to do? There's no way. I understand. We look at books or whatever your idea is, and you're like, it's like you asking me to pick who's my favorite child. Like, this is not this, right? Maybe I'll say something a little bit different where you're like, oh, I love them all the same. But, right. But, but I think the reality is that I would go to, what's the size of the market and how big is the problem? Because the reality is that if the problem is big enough, the income follows, the impact follows. So you want to think about the size of the market and the size of the problem, right? So if it's a small problem and it's like such a unique thing, you're gonna spend all this time and research to put a book together, and one person gonna be impacted by it, right? But if you get the size of the market, and here's what I tell people. When it comes to the size of the market, we try to find the little segment that has not been tapped. Big mistake. You want to go with something that's already proven. So when someone tells me somebody already wrote a book in this, I'm like, congratulations, you have just had somebody else validate it for you versus you thinking, well, I want to just be a unicorn. Like, you don't want to be a unicorn. You want to just be the next iteration of whatever the thing is, right? So you have TV shows now that are doing crime and stuff. They're not Law and Order. They just realized Law and Order works. So we got a crime show too. So ABC do it, CBS do it. Every network does the same thing. Oh, you got a medical show? I got one too, Grey's Anatomy. So they just keep doing that. They don't reinvent the wheel. And so I want to give everybody else the same thing. Like, you don't got to reinvent the wheel. What works? And then you just come and say, hey, you've been looking at this from a 90-degree angle. What does it look like from 91 degrees? What does it look like from 89 degrees? And that's where you become unique, but you work within something that has already been proven. So when somebody's done whatever it is you want to do, they just validated the market for you. And if you see a lot of books on a topic, that just tells you how great the problem is, that no one person could solve it. And that's a good thing, right? Like, you don't want to be like, well, only one person wrote a book on this problem. Is it really a serious problem? Right? Like, if that's the case, versus like every company has an HR department. All right, well, clearly HR is important. So that's where I would go and lean on. It's like, okay, if you have multiple expertise, you want to go ahead and say, okay, well, my first book, where am I going to be able to get some momentum, or where have I already established myself in terms of years of experience, delivery, results I've been able to deliver, to lean into that to go and have your first book? Because it's hard. It's hard to write a book. So you want to start with the thing that with your eyes closed, you could kind of do.
And I think that just freed somebody, because we're always trying to think of what is the next big thing? What is something different? What is something
Yeah.
totally different? And I think you're right. There's so many hamburger joints. There's so many
Facts.
malls, different types of clothing stores, even the same types of businesses. And there's so much about, let's say, lead generation. Why? Because it's the most pertinent problem in business is, how do I get leads, right? And make sure
Yeah.
that people are continuing to flow into my business. And so I think that's such a good point, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to have our spin on the wheel.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Just a little something, a little pop,
Yeah.
a little pop.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about structure then. So, what are 2 or 3 book formats that work really well for speakers, coaches, course creators, and how do you help them choose the right one? So, tell us about book formats, because a lot of people just think, write a book, right? And so, what is a book format? What are they? And what are the ones
Yeah.
that work best for us in this community?
No, in this community, I think one of the biggest one, we should come back to like the first question we talked about, is how do I take my expertise, is package it into some kind of framework or process, right? Because that's something that naturally opens up the door for you to teach people what it is, right? So if you're a speaker, a trainer, a course creator, there's some type of information transferring over to you that allows you to get a result, right? So there's a framework book. So what's your framework? What's your 3-step process, your 5-step process, your 7-step process, whatever the number is? What is that process that somebody can go and follow as if it's a manual, is one thing you could do. That's one framework. And I see that work really, really well for like people who are course creators, because you already have your course in probably some kind of modular type of format. So now you could easily just change the word module to chapter, and then put stories in it, where a course may not have as many stories and stuff. You have stories to then just go ahead and show the framework in action. So that's one of them. The other one is a problem and solution type of book. So what's the problem that somebody has, and what's your solution to it? And then having case studies and testimonials that kind of show that being applied, right? So you take the book Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That's a problem. Hey, people are not inspired. They're not taking the action that they need to take. They want to feel fulfilled in what it is that they're doing. That's the problem. All right, well, he now created this thing called, the solution is you have to attach it to some kind of bigger purpose, bigger than yourself. And then he used examples to show you that that actually works. But then if you go framework, you go like a person that we know, Russell Brunson, Expert Secrets, there's a framework, right? And frameworks are not limited to a one framework. It could be framework for every single section of the process, right? So he got story, hook, and offer, and hook, story, offer, and all these different things within the Expert Secrets thing. But those are the biggest ones. I know there's one more, which is like a story-based lessons type of book. Those work, but they typically work for someone who has a very big already following, because people fall in love with their stories so much so that they think that immediately it opens up the door for them to be seen as experts, and they end up falling on their face, because it's like, okay, well, I know that story, I've heard that story before, and it's not framed in a teachable way, right? So if you had like Michelle Obama, even though we all know her, like, what's the framework for becoming? Right? She told stories. about her journey and becoming, but what's the framework? It's harder for her to teach it. But because she is who she is, she's not being hired to teach a framework on how to become. She's just there to say, just give me more stories, right? And so I think we fall into this trap, and so I would recommend the framework format, or what is a big problem and what is your solution to that problem, and then having supporting stories that show that solution actually working.
Yeah, that's good. And I know we talked about before that if we're not Michelle Obama or Oprah or something like that, then we really do need to steer clear, at least for now, till we have some more
Yeah,
money.
yeah, yeah. Until you have the
Because,
thing.
I want to know what it's like to become the first lady of the United States, right? But if I was like becoming Ramona Lawrence, people are like crickets. Like,
Yeah,
it's great, and I think you're great, but
that's always the toughest thing when I'm coaching somebody, because what it sounds like is me saying you're not big enough. And so they fight you and say, "Well, who are you to tell me that I ain't big enough?" And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. It's not even about that discussion. My reasoning for sharing that with you is because I know, despite how big you think you ain't gonna feel that big if your book is sitting in your garage and not in someone's hands being used and making an impact." So whenever I give somebody an advice on what book to write, how to write it, it's always with the perspective of, I know what's the highest value for you. Your highest value isn't your ego. I hope your highest value is the effectiveness that your information had in the hands of the person that needed it.
yeah, yeah, that's good. So now we're at the point where the message is clear. We got a good format that we want to use. So now, we're in the systems boutique. So I'm going to take it to the systems. How do we build a system that actually write the book so that it doesn't take us 2, 3, 4, 5 years
Fast.
to get
Yeah, yeah,
there?
no, 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 no. I think one of the things, and we even did this with the podcast, right? Like it's like you got to start with the date and work backwards, right? I know that, like, when you have the date, it allows you to make sound decisions on what the system and the pieces of that system need to look like, right? So if I know like the due date is 6 months from now, then I'm like, okay, well, I gotta have a marketing system in place. And also, when you think about the system, you want to think about the different phases of a book, right? There's the pre-launch before it's ever written. There's the launching of the book, and then there's the post-launch. But most people don't think about it in that way. They don't think about those systems of the different phases a book goes through. And so I think what we end up doing is we just plan for the wedding, and then no one had a plan for the marriage. It's just like, oh, I wrote it. And I'm like, yeah, okay. What happened? Or a baby shower. I got baby talk, right? So they're like, oh my gosh, oh my God, all these great gifts. All right, you gotta open the box. Like, the gifts is cool, but it stay in the box. The kid can't wear the clothes. It can't, like, you can't use it. So I think you want to think about it from those different phases of like, okay, well, what does the book look like before it's out there? So that means developing relationships, networking before you need the help, right? So did you build your Dream 100 list of people that you would say is ideally, if the book was in their hands, they can go and amplify your message and give you more exposure? You do not do that during the launch. You do that in the pre-launch so that when you need them to come up, it's not at that point you go and start trying to eat from the tree while you are planting. Like, that's the worst thing you could do, right? So if you start that up in the beginning, you start to go and do something for them. Now, when you need an ask, when your ask come, it's something they're reciprocating from something you've already done, but you've been seeding this relationship from the beginning, right? So that's the before. That's understanding the relationships and partnerships that you need to establish in the marketplace as well. After that, then you go into the launch phase. Like, okay, now I'm launching, which podcast I gotta be on. But here's the thing. Remember, I said we gotta know the date. So if you know the date, you now know, let me go and do these podcasts around the date. So that way I got some marketing material that's going to come out to push the book. Instead of me saying, buy my book, I could go say, hey, I was on a System Boutique podcast and I talked about the book, and the book is coming out tomorrow, right? So it's like you want to have this energy, this momentum that's being pushed. But if you don't have a date, you're like, well, when do you go on the podcast? If you don't know when the book gonna come out, like, when do you show up on the show? When do you do these media tours? So when you see the celebrities do this media push, They know when the movie dropping. It's not an accident that they go and do the media tour the week of the movie coming out on Friday, and you see them on the every late night show and the morning shows Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's because they know what date they're trying to push everybody to. So it's the same thing for us. We got to do those very same things. And then the other thing I want to share is you got to know who needs, like, there's people you need to have on your team. So it's not just systems in terms of tools and plans, but it's also the thing that I would argue probably moves the needle the most, which is people. And I know you and I share this book that we truly love called Who Not How. And I think it's important for you to know, like, okay, well, I ain't got to figure out how to do it. I just got to figure out who the who's are and stay in your lane. And you do the who that you were supposed to do,
Yeah.
and somebody else do the who that they got to do.
And I've seen you carrying this out in real time with Coach Carlos. Shout out to Coach Carlos, who
Yes,
is
yes,
launching his new book, No More Dancing. We're going to shout you out, Coach
yeah.
Carlos. Hopefully you are listening today, but y'all go and check him out to No More Dancing. It released on May 6th. And so we are excited to support him. But in that process, I have seen you doing the pre-launch things. He's had things on social media. He's had groups of people coming together. He's had the testimonials. He's had all of those types of things in the system. I've seen, I told you my brain translates how
Yeah,
system.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you like, okay, she done peeped the system.
Yeah, she
Um,
done seen the whole thing.
So I'm looking at the system here, and you're right. I mean, I can see all of that unfolding and how, you need to do all this pre-launch stuff. It's not just about writing the book. And then he's going to do some things. He's been on podcasts. He's going to do some things after it launches.
Correct.
And then a couple of podcast episodes ago, we talked about your book being your employee, right?
Right.
So y'all go back and check that one out. That one is back on May 6th. That is the podcast episode we did with your book being your employee. But y'all, listen, this is a full system. It is not, okay, let me be cute and go write all these words down. We have thought about the process of how you come to the idea. How do
Right.
you narrow it down? How do you determine what you're going to write about? Not something totally new, something that is already proven. Don't make yourself go out here doing all the just randomness, right?
No,
Then we
100%.
and so this next part is kind of a little bit about what we talked about with your book being your employee. And so as we're thinking about from this very beginning of the writing process, how should somebody think about using their book in their business? So beyond just selling it. So we're not stopping at that system. We are like, okay, we got to do something else with it. It is our employee now. Okay.
Yeah.
So what system do they need to have in place so the book feeds their offers? So it might be other types of content, speaking, curriculum, like we talk about with Coach Carlos. So what do we need to do to kind of, in the very beginning, think about our book as something that we're going to use beyond just the writing process?
Yeah, I think it's important to, like you said, with the employee element, to say, okay, well, what's the job that I want this book to do for me? And it's typically the place that a lot of people get stuck in because they just never thought of their book as an employee. They didn't understand that they had to have a job description. And they think, hey, sales, and sales, if you write the right book, it actually should be selling itself. But the other side of the coin is, okay, what doors do I need to have open for me that this book can go ahead and do that for, right? And I think media is a big one. Media loves authors. So that's something you want to definitely tap into, leveraging relationships, saying you're an author, having a book coming out. They love, because I think when we think about what a book is going to do, you got to think about like the other person. Like put yourself in that person's shoes. They got to go to a producer and tell them, I got a guess. And that guess needs to have a level of certainty that they could deliver on the thing that you are bringing them on for. So the author part is like people trust you. Like, you know what you're talking about. Like, you wouldn't write a book if you didn't. So I look at that, I say, okay, well, the job that I needed to do is I needed to get me exposure. Okay, well, exposure in front of whom? right? Like who you trying to get exposure for. And once you understand who you're trying to contact, which goes back to the three W's that we talked about episodes ago, right? Once you know who you're trying to talk, then you now know which other people platforms you can take advantage of or benefit from, right? So the OPP. So I'm like, okay, I want to reach business entrepreneurs who are busy. Well, then I would want to come on the System Boutique podcast, because the System Boutique podcast is helping busy entrepreneurs learn how to leverage operations and systems to be able to do more without having to necessarily spend more of their time. Well, dope. That's the audience I want, because I want to create their systems and I want to do all the other stuff around a book and let them stay in their zone of genius. Well, this is apples to apples. But this is the stuff that you got to think about when you say selling. Selling is not just the book being purchased. Selling is a process from end to end, from platforms to all of these things. So to your question, I think that's the biggest thing when I think about like what is it supposed to do? It's literally a master key. The question I always ask people is, what's the door you needed to open? And then making sure that you understand the receiver of that door, like who when you knock, who's opening the door and what do they respond to, right? So if I got like a person who's Jamaican and I go and knock on your door with some Bob Marley, you're like, yo, that's one of like, whoever knocking on my door, that's one of my peoples. Like they knocked in the Bob Marley in there. So it's being intentional ahead of time. And I think that's where you get the yeses that you're looking for, is that intentionality ahead of time of knowing who you want to do business with, knowing who you want to partner with, and then positioning yourself so that they feel as though this was something they were supposed to do instead of you having to beg them to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's such a good activity. I don't know if you do that already, but having the people that come into your program to write a job description for their book as their first activity. Oh my goodness.
Mhm. I love that. That's a
Yeah.
yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. I'm gonna have to implement that.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's
I told you my brain is like translating like
listen,
out of
oh
the
my
word.
gosh, that's so true. That's so true. And it's a
Yeah.
qualifier. That's
Yeah.
a quiz. Like,
Yeah.
one of the questions could be that on a quiz. Like if you don't know, then it's like, that's a red flag. Or I need to help you with that. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
for
cool.
sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. So thank you, Coach Geo. This has been a wonderful conversation. If you all have not gotten to the process where you are ready to start writing your book, you need to get on it. This is something that I think is so important. I think a book is such an important part of a speaker's life, a coach's life, a consultant's life. Like you said, it gives us so much credibility and so much that we can use and so much that we can leverage, especially if we think about it as our employees. So thank you, Coach Geo,
Thank
for
you.
another amazing episode of
Yes.
the Systems Boutique podcast. And we thank you all for listening to this episode of the podcast. And we will see you next week on the Systems Boutique podcast. Talk to you later. Bye.
Take care.
All right, my chic CEOs, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you found value in today's conversation, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with another star. That's a speaker, a teacher, an author, or a coach who absolutely needs it. And hey, if you're ready to finally get your systems together, let's chat. Head over to thesystemsboutique.com/strategy to book your systems style strategy call, where we'll map out your perfect business back end. So until next time, keep it chic, keep it systemized, and keep shining like the absolute star you are. See ya.